My husband's secretary called me the ball and chain. Turns out she's the one who got fired. I heard it over the clink of glasses and that loud, fake laughing kind of restaurant noise, like a sentence thrown casually into the air, meant to land somewhere soft. "Careful," Kayla said, leaning toward the two guys from accounting, her hand on my husband's forearm like it belonged there. "The ball and chain's here." Then she looked straight at me and smiled, bright and unbothered, like we were all in on the joke. My stomach did that awful drop in heat thing, like I'd miss a step on stairs. I stopped mid-stride with my coat, half off my shoulders, my fingers still pinching the collar. My husband, Ethan, had his back turned because he was shaking someone's hand, and Kayla's nails were pale pink and glossy where they rested on him. The table was packed with people from his office, the kind of end-of-quarter dinner I'd been invited to at the last second, and suddenly I could feel every single chair, every face, every whisper of attention. I forced my feet forward because not moving would have looked like weakness, and I hated that I was already thinking in those terms. Kayla's smile didn't change when I came closer. She just tilted her head and said, sweet as sugar, "Oh my God, hi. You made it." It was a Tuesday night when Ethan texted me. Dinner ran long. "Boss wants everyone to go to Luca's. You can come if you want." Like I was a guest in my own marriage. We'd been together 8 years, married for 3. The first 5 years of our relationship, his job was just his job. He worked late sometimes. We complained about traffic. We watched Netflix in our pajamas. We talked about normal things like bills and what paint color to choose for the spare room. Then his old assistant retired and Qley got hired. And somehow Ethan's job started bleeding into our life like a stain you don't notice until it's already set. Qley was 20-something, super organized, a lifesaver. And this part he didn't say out loud, but I could hear it anyway, fun. She laughed at his jokes. She remembered everyone's birthday. She sent cute emails with exclamation points and emojis, and "Happy Monday," like Mondays didn't want to die. Ethan would come home and tell me stories that always ended with "Kayla said," or "Kayla did," and I'd smile and nod because what was I supposed to do? Get jealous of a woman whose literal job was to make his day easier? At first, it was little stuff. He'd get texts at 8:30 p.m. while we were brushing our teeth. "Quick question." His phone would buzz on the nightstand. He'd glance at it, frown like he was annoyed, and tap a response anyway. I'd say, "Is that work?" And he'd go, "Yeah, just Kayla," like her name was meant to soothe me. It became bigger stuff that still looked small if you squinted. A dinner with his team where I wasn't invited because it's last minute. A weekend team-building thing that apparently included spouses, but he didn't tell me until the night before and then acted confused when I didn't want to rearrange everything. A calendar invite for a charity gala that I found out about because I saw the suit bag in the closet, and when I asked, Ethan said, "Oh, yeah, Kayla's been coordinating it." Why wouldn't she include me? I asked once. I try to keep it light. I try to make it about logistics, not feelings. Ethan shrugged, half-zipping his dress shirt. "She probably assumed I'd tell you." "Did you?" He paused, like he was scrolling through his brain for the moment he'd mentioned it. "I thought I did." That became the theme. Qley assumed. Ethan thought he did. I was always the one standing there with the missing piece, feeling like the last person to find out what was happening in my own life. The first time I met Qley properly was at the office holiday party. Ethan had told me about it for weeks. How ridiculous the venue was, how his boss insisted on a theme, how Qley was basically running the whole thing. When we walked in, she spotted him from across the room like a heat-seeking missile. She practically floated over in a sparkly green dress that made her look like a champagne ornament, and she squealed, "Ethan," like he was a celebrity. Then she hugged him. Not a quick, polite hug. A full wrap around the neck, cheek to cheek, lingering hug. I stood there holding my coat like an idiot until she finally stepped back and said, "Oh, you must be," and looked me up and down like she was trying to place where I fit in the picture. "I'm his wife," I said because I didn't know what else to say without sounding defensive. Kayla's eyes flicked to Ethan's ring and then to mine, like she was confirming something. "Right. Yes. She grabbed my hand with both of hers like we were besties. "I've heard so much about you." From him, I wanted to ask. "Heard what?" She spent the rest of that night orbiting Ethan. Every time he moved, she was there with a drink, with a reminder, with a joke. She kept calling him my favorite human and work husband, and people laughed like it was cute. I laughed too, because everyone else was laughing, and because I didn't want to be the only person not laughing. But I went home with that laughter stuck in my throat like a piece of dry bread. After the holiday party, I told Ethan, as carefully as I could, "She's a lot." He sighed in a way that instantly made me feel like I was about to become the ball and chain, even before she'd ever said it. "She's just friendly. She does that with everyone." "With everyone? Or with you?" I asked. He looked at me like I'd asked if he was secretly an alien. "Babe, come on. She's my assistant." And that's what made me shut up. Because the truth is, I didn't want to be jealous. I didn't want to be the wife who polices her husband's coworkers. I didn't want to be the stereotype people mock. So I swallowed it, told myself I was overreacting, and tried to be normal. But Qley kept doing this thing where she'd make herself the gatekeeper. Ethan's phone would buzz, and he'd say, "Qley needs me to sign something." He'd be halfway through dinner with me, and suddenly have to check one thing. And if I asked, "Can it wait?" he'd look torn, like I was making him choose between being a good husband and being a responsible employee. Once, I texted Ethan during the day to ask what time he'd be home. He didn't respond for hours, which wasn't like him. Later, when he got home, I said, "Did you not see my text?" He frowned and pulled his phone out. "No, I didn't." Weird. The next morning, when he was in the shower, his phone lit up on the counter with a notification. "Qley, I moved your personal text to other so you don't get distracted," smiling face with halo. I just stared at it. My mouth went dry. My hand actually trembled when I picked up the phone, like my body knew something my brain didn't want to admit. When Ethan came out, towel around his waist, I held the phone out. "What is this?" He read it and blinked. "Oh, she was helping. I get a ton of notifications. She moved my texts." I kept my voice low because the walls suddenly felt thin. Without asking, he scrubbed his hair like he wanted to erase the conversation. "She didn't move your texts. She probably just..." She was showing me some focus mode setting or whatever. "Ethan." My throat tightened around his name. "That's not normal." "She's techie," he said, then immediately looked irritated at himself for saying it. Like he knew it sounded stupid. "Look, she's just trying to be helpful. She's obsessed with productivity stuff." "That's not productivity," I said. "That's her touching parts of your life that aren't hers." He kissed my forehead like that was supposed to fix it. "I'll tell her not to." "Okay." And he did kind of. He mentioned it casually like, "Hey, don't mess with my phone settings." And Qley sent me a smiley face apology through him. Not to me. Through him. Like I was a child, he needed to relay a message to. After that, she got subtler. She started doing the thing where she'd talk about me like I was a concept, not a person. "Tell your wife we're stealing you late this week. Your wife must hate me. Your wife is so patient." Always with that fake laugh. Always setting me up as the nag and herself as the fun one. So when I walked into Luca's that Tuesday and heard the ball and chain, it wasn't out of nowhere. It was just the first time she said it out loud with the mask off. Ethan finally turned and saw me. His face lit up, genuinely, and he stood to hug me. "Hey, you came." I hugged him back, but my arms felt stiff. Qley slid into a seat, like she was claiming territory. "We didn't know if you'd make it," she said, and the way she said it made it sound like a challenge. I sat down across from Ethan, forcing my hands to stop shaking by wrapping them around my water glass. "Hi," I said to the table in general, because everyone was suddenly very interested in their menus. Ethan leaned closer. "You okay?" I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. "I'm fine." Qley was already talking again, telling a story about how Ethan would be lost without me, and the guys laughed. She kept touching his sleeve when she spoke. She kept using his name like it was a pet name. Ethan didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did and he liked the attention. The thought hit me so sharp I felt sick. Halfway through the appetizers, Qley reached across Ethan to grab a breadbasket, and her fingers brushed his hand. She didn't move away quickly. She let it linger, then looked at me like, "What are you going to do about it?" That's when I heard myself say, calm and clear, "Qley, why did you call me the ball and chain?" The whole table froze. It was like someone had cut the music. Kayla blinked, her smile still there, but thinner now. What? You said when I walked in, I said. I kept my voice steady, because if it shook, she'd win. You told them to be careful because the ball and chain was here. Ethan's head snapped toward her. Kayla. Her laugh came out too loud. Oh my God. I was joking. It's a phrase. Like, married guys. I didn't look away. Do you usually joke about your boss's wife like that? One of the accountants cleared his throat and suddenly became fascinated by his napkin. Kayla's eyes flicked to Ethan, like he was supposed to rescue her. Ethan knows I'm kidding. We joke around. I didn't think you'd take it personally. I'm a person, I said. So yes. Ethan's face went red in patches. He put his fork down like he couldn't keep eating while this was happening. Kayla, that's not okay. She lifted her hands, palms up. I'm sorry if it offended you. Truly. This is such a weird vibe. I thought you were cool. There it was. The little blade tucked into a compliment. I thought you were cool. I pushed my chair back slightly, enough to create space between my body and the table. I'm going to the bathroom, I said, because if I stayed another second, I was going to either cry or throw a bread roll at her head. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror under fluorescent light that made me look washed out. My eyes were too shiny. My lipstick had worn off at the corner like I'd been biting my mouth. I ran cold water over my wrists and tried to breathe through that tight, hot feeling in my chest. When I came back, Ethan was standing near the bar, his shoulders rigid. Kayla was sitting at the table, laughing too loudly again, like she was desperate to reset the scene. Ethan saw me and stepped toward me immediately. Can we go? He asked quietly. I blinked. What? He leaned in. I told him we're leaving. I'm not doing this. Part of me wanted to say no, make him stay, make him choose publicly. Another part of me wanted to disappear into my car and scream. I nodded because I couldn't trust my voice. Kayla stood up as we gathered our coats. Ethan, wait. He didn't look at her. We'll talk tomorrow. Her face shifted, just for a second, into something like panic. Then she plastered the smile back on. Okay, sure. Have a good night. Her eyes followed me as I walked out, and I swear they were cold. In the car, Ethan gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went pale. We drove in silence for a full minute, the city lights flashing across his face. Finally, he said, I didn't know she'd say that. I believe you, I said, and that surprised me. I did believe he hadn't heard it before. That was the problem. He hadn't been hearing a lot of things. He exhaled hard. She crossed the line. Yes, I said. My voice came out rougher than I expected. And she's been crossing lines for a while, Ethan. He swallowed. I know. That admission hit me like a jolt. He glanced at me, guilt all over his face. I've noticed some stuff. I just didn't think it was like this. I didn't think it was disrespectful to you. I thought it was just her personality. And the phone thing? I asked. And the texts? And her acting like she's the gatekeeper to you. Ethan rubbed his forehead. I shouldn't have let it get that far. There was a pause, and then he said the part that hurt the most. I didn't want to deal with it. I stared out the window, watching the blurred streetlights. So you let me deal with it, I said quietly. When we got home, we didn't do the dramatic yelling thing. It was worse than that. It was this low, exhausted conversation where everything I'd been holding back finally had to come out because it couldn't stay in anymore. I told him how small she made me feel, how embarrassing it was to be turned into a punchline, how it made me question whether he respected me when he let another woman constantly insert herself into our marriage. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch with his hands clasped, head bowed like a kid caught doing something stupid. I'm sorry, he kept saying, and it didn't fix it, but it mattered that he said it without excuses this time. The next morning, Ethan didn't go straight into work mode like he usually did. He sat at the kitchen table with his coffee, jaw set, and said, I'm going to HR. My heart thudded. What? I'm going to tell them what happened, he said, and I'm going to ask to have her reassigned. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Ethan, that's going to be a whole thing. It already is, he said, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard in months. Clarity. He left, and I spent the morning jittery, like my body was waiting for impact. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, Hi, is this? She said my name. This is Marissa from HR at Ethan's company. Ethan asked me to reach out to you. My mouth went dry again. Okay, I just want to check in, she said gently, professional but warm. Ethan shared what happened last night. I'm sorry you experienced that. I stared at the wall. I hadn't expected anyone to validate it so plainly. Thank you. We're going to conduct an investigation, Marissa continued. Part of that includes collecting any relevant communications. Ethan mentioned there may be text messages or emails that made you uncomfortable. If you have any, we'd like to document them. I didn't have to dig for anything dramatic. I didn't have to invent a story. I had the weird focus mode text. I had screenshots of Qley texting Ethan at 11 p.m. about missing him at the office, loudly crying face with a crying emoji that made my skin crawl. I had a calendar invite Qley had sent for a couple's event that somehow didn't include me. I had the little things that added up to a pattern. Still, my finger hovered over the send button when I packaged everything into an email, because sending it felt like crossing a point of no return. It wasn't just me being hurt. It was me putting something on record. I had sent anyway. That afternoon, Ethan came home early. He looked wrung out, like he'd been in a room with no air. He sat down across from me and said, "You're not going to believe this." My stomach tightened. What now? He blew out a laugh that wasn't funny. Qley filed a complaint against you. I stared at him. Against me? She told HR you stormed in last night, verbally attack her, and that she feels unsafe because you're possessive and unstable. Ethan's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jump. She said you threatened her job. For a second, I couldn't speak. It was like my brain was buffering. Then heat rushed up my neck. Are you serious? Ethan nodded, eyes bright with anger. Marissa told me because she said the timeline doesn't make sense, and she wanted to be transparent. Also because he stopped, like he was choosing his words carefully. Also because Qley's complaint opened a bigger file. What does that mean? My voice was sharp now because I couldn't hold calm anymore. Ethan leaned forward. Apparently, this isn't the first time she's done something like this. 2 other women in the office have complained about her making inappropriate comments about their marriages. One guy complained she kept touching him and calling him work husband even after he told her to stop. My skin prickled. So she's been doing this to everyone. Ethan nodded. And that's not all. He pulled out his laptop, opened an email chain, and turned it toward me. Marissa asked IT to check something because Qley claimed you were messaging her. They found weird activity. His voice dropped. She's been forwarding emails from my account to her personal email. I felt my stomach flip. What? Ethan's eyes were wide, like he was seeing his own life from outside his body. Not just scheduling stuff. Client documents. Vendor invoices. There were emails I never even saw because she'd filter them and handle them, except she wasn't handling them. She was forwarding them. What? I whispered. He shook his head. They're still figuring it out. But Marissa said it's a terminable offense. It stopped being about me in that moment. It stopped being about a petty insult at a restaurant. It became something darker. Someone who'd inserted herself into his work life so deeply that she thought she could use it. Over the next week, Ethan barely slept. HR interviewed people. IT pulled logs. Qley was put on leave, pending investigation. Ethan came home every night looking like he'd been carrying a weight all day. And in the middle of all that, we were also trying to deal with the fact that our marriage had been poked and prodded by a person who'd treated me like an obstacle, not a partner. The weirdest part was how quiet the house felt. No late-night buzzes. No, just Qley notifications. Ethan's phone sat on the counter like a normal phone again. Sometimes I'd catch myself flinching when it lit up and then realizing it was just a weather alert or a group chat. One night, Ethan came home and stood in the doorway with his keys still in his hand. His face was pale, eyes tired. "She's fired," he said. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something loosening in my chest that I hadn't realized was clenched for months. "Okay," I said because I didn't know what else to say. Ethan set his keys down slowly like his hands were shaky. They found she was using company accounts to order personal stuff. She was manipulating calendars to make it look like people missed deadlines. She forwarded confidential client information, and he swallowed, his voice cracking just slightly she tried to pin it on other employees. He sank onto the couch like his legs finally gave out. Marissa told me she called you the ball and chain in front of a bunch of people before, not just last night. Apparently, she's been saying it as a joke for weeks. My throat tightened, and no one told me. Ethan looked at me, and there was pure shame. No one should have had to, he said. I should have stopped it. We sat there for a long time, not talking, just sitting with the aftermath. Because the truth is, her getting fired didn't erase the fact that she'd had access to him in ways I didn't, and he'd let it happen because it was easier. It didn't erase the way I'd felt walking into that restaurant, hearing myself turned into a punchline. Later, when we finally talked, Ethan didn't try to minimize anything. He didn't say it was just a joke. He didn't say you're overreacting. He said, I'm messed up. And then he said, tell me what you need from me. So I told him. I needed him to stop treating my discomfort like an inconvenience. I told him I needed boundaries that weren't just words he said once and forgot. I told him I needed to feel like his wife again, not the person standing outside his life trying to get invited in. Ethan listened, really listened. Then he did something he'd never done before. He called Marissa on speaker and asked what steps he could take to make sure this never happened again. They adjusted his access. They changed protocols. He got a new assistant, someone older, blunt, and apparently allergic to exclamation points. And Ethan started leaving his phone on the counter at dinner without flinching like he was missing oxygen. It's been a couple months now. We're better, but not magically fixed. Sometimes I still think about that moment at Luca's, the way Kayla smiled at me like she could label me and shrink me with 2 words. Sometimes Ethan still gets quiet when he talks about work, like he's afraid of bringing it home again. But the difference is when I say, hey, this feels off, he doesn't sigh like I'm ruining his day. He looks at me and says, okay, tell me. And I won't lie. There's a part of me that wishes Kayla had been fired purely for calling me the ball and chain, because it would feel poetic. But reality isn't poetic. Reality is messy, eh? She got fired because she couldn't keep her hands off people's lives. Mine, Ethan's, the company's. And eventually she touched something that left fingerprints. Sometimes I imagine her telling someone the story from her angle, like she's the victim, like she got punished for just joking. But I was there. I saw the way she looked at me. I felt the way she tried to wedge herself into our marriage like she belonged. Turns out I wasn't the ball and chain. I was the boundary she didn't think would hold.